Well, hello everyone. Today I'd like to talk a little bit more about Chapter 13, the next chapter in our QM3345 class. So one of the things that I mentioned, I believe, in the announcement for this week was the COO framework, or the Chief Operating Officer framework. So for anyone who's responsible for ensuring that deliveries get met and within an organization, whether that's products or services, you're going to use this sort of framework just to kind of help you plan and make the appropriate decisions at the right levels. So this is the course framework that we're going to be using. And you notice that it starts with forecasting, and that was Chapter 4. And once we do forecasting, we need to determine if we have enough aggregated capacity to meet the forecast. And not only do we have enough capacity, but do we have the cheapest kind of capacity available? And that's really what aggregate planning is all about. So forecasting is an input into aggregate planning. And once we finish our aggregate plan and find the cheapest and lowest risk plan, the output for that plan will go into ending inventory schedule. We call that a master schedule. All right, so this week we're at the aggregate planning stage, and then next week we'll be at the end item inventory level. So the key concepts for Chapter 13, as I mentioned before, aggregate planning is a process where we find the cheapest and lowest risk way of meeting forecasted demand. And we can adjust capacity. And again, we can adjust it by adding a second shift. We can adjust it by hiring or laying off employees. We can adjust it by adding subcontracting. We can also adjust it by making a lot of stuff in advance and then using that stuff instead of making it for the future. So we're going to look at three different types of general plans. The first one is a level plan, and that's where capacity stays constant over all periods. A chase plan is more of a service model where capacity is going to meet demand. Again, because customers usually don't like to be inventoried, so we have to make sure we adjust our staffing to meet the number of customers that we have. And then a mixed plan is kind of a combo of a level and a chase plan. Now, one thing that we're not going to be doing is a linear programming approach or the transportation method. These types of approaches give us a really good answer, optimal answers, but they're not really well suited for actual more complex problems. So we're going to be using the trial and error approach, similar to what we did with Chapter 4 and forecasting. All right, so this slide shows kind of a picture of what we're talking about. The green, kind of that green baby food curve, for instance, here in this level plan, that's demand, okay? So this first one here is a level plan. Now the red bar, the horizontal red line, that is capacity or our output. You can see that it's level over time. It's level independent of kind of how, bumpy demand is. So with a level plan, we are going to keep our total capacity the same each period. And again, this period here where we need to have inventory or where we're going to be building inventory, because our capacity is greater than demand. And then like these humps here where we're going to be using inventory because again, demand exceeds our capacity. The next picture is a chase plan, and my bad. And a chase plan is basically, it's a mirror image. It kind of shadows demand, all right? So the red is our capacity, and you can see that it's basically a mirror image of our demand. What we're going to do is adjust it so that we meet what the demand is. And then this last one here is a mixed plan, and you can see that we have kind of a level approach at the beginning here. You can kind of see we have kind of a level plan going on here, and then we shifted to this chase plan. Okay, so this is a combo plan. It's one of different kinds that you can do. Okay, the overall goal, I mean, so should we do level, should we do chase, should we do mixed? I mean, the overall goal here is we're trying to minimize our total costs and trying to minimize our risks. So again, with a level plan, um, a good advantage of that is we have a constant output rate. And there's a lot of advantages that go with that. Like, for instance, morale usually is higher, quality is usually higher, turnover is usually lower. But the disadvantage with level plans is that you have to have a space to store inventory. Anytime you're building inventory, you have extra costs, you have obsolescence, you've got damage, you've got theft, you've got all the problems associated with having inventory around. And so that's the disadvantage with the level plan. The chase plan, you don't have any ending inventory, so that's a big advantage of the chase plan. But the disadvantage with it is all the extra costs that you incur for adjusting capacity. So hiring people and laying them off. So think about, kind of the migrant worker situation in the summer where you hire all these people just to work in the summer and then you lay them all off. And so again, the disadvantage with the chase plan is that you're doing that. And again, when you're bringing a lot of new people in, you're training them, maybe quality won't be as good. And morale may not be as good because, again, you tend to hiring and laying off and that kind of thing. So really what the mixed plan attempts to do is mitigate kind of the disadvantages of both the level and the chase. Because, we want it all, right? So again, we want to make sure that we have as constant of an output as possible, and we don't want to have to adjust it too much, but if we do have to adjust it, then it's usually to avoid a large amount of inventory. Okay, so let's just start with the level plan. The first thing that you should do when you do a level plan is you need to calculate the level rate. So what is this constant rate of output that we're going to be using? Now there are two situations where we can calculate the level rate. One is where we allow back orders. So a back order is when we fulfill an order in the future. We don't have inventory for it right now, and we promise to deliver it in some future period. The second situation is where we don't allow back orders. So we have to meet all demand in the period, either in the period that it exists. Okay, and so both of these level rates are recommended for calculating what that overall output rate should be. So using the M&B case, so if you go to your course document folders, there's an M&B case listed there. And if you look at the M&B case, it gives you 4 months or 4 periods of demand, and we're asked to do various plans with it. It also gives us a beginning inventory of 200. So orders are allowed, so when you can go late on meeting demand, to calculate the level rate, it's going to be the sum of listed demand, so that's shown here. And you're going to subtract your beginning inventory, which was 200 in our case, and you're going to add any planned ending inventory, which is 0 in our case, and then you divide by the number of periods. And so, given the information from the M&B case, we find that the level rate when we allow backlogs is 850 units per period. Now, if you read the M&B case, it says that there's a high priority placed on customer service. And so the M&B case does not, as it's written, allow backlogs. So when back orders are not allowed, we're going to use this heuristic method to calculate the rate. So this heuristic method says we're going to take of the forecasted demand to its highest point, then subtract the beginning inventory, then add the planned ending inventory, and then divide by the number of periods to the peak. So if you look at the demand profile of M&B, you can see that it occurs in period 2. It's at 1,800 units. So what we're going to do is we're going to add to peak, so it's period 1 and period 2, minus beginning inventory plus planned ending, and then we're going to just divide by 2 periods because it's just 2 periods to the peak. In this case, we get a different level rate, 1,250 unit period. All right, so we're going to, the next example I'm going to show you is how to do a level plan where we do not allow backlogs. Okay. Now, before we get into the level plan, let's take a look at the M&B case in terms of what it tells us that we can add capacity in a couple different ways. First of all, if we ask our 10 employees to just work regular time, which regular time is just $10 per unit, we have 10 employees and each employee can do 100 units per period. So our regular capacity is 1,000 units per. We can also add a second shift up to 6 employees. And again, we assume that each employee can do 100 units per period, so we can get another 600 units per period from a second shift. The case also tells us that we can use overtime to add capacity, and we can use up to 5 employees on overtime. So again, 5 employees times 100 units per period, we can get another 500 units per period on overtime. And then holding costs are assessed on ending inventory. Okay? So that's what we're given in the case. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to bring my Excel workbook here and share. Okay, so hopefully you can see that. And what I'm going to do here is show you how we would do this on Excel. Okay, so the first thing we said is we calculated our total capacity of 1,250. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to type in 1,250. Again, that was our level rate that we calculated in the previous slide. So a level plan means that this total capacity line stays the same each period. All right. So in terms of doing your aggregate plan now for a level plan, we want to make sure that all our ending inventories are 0 and higher, because if we have a negative ending inventory, that means it's a backlog. Okay, and we want to use the cheapest type of capacity available. All right, so it tells us, first of all, we need to make 1,250 each period. So we know we've got 1,000 units of regular time. That is the cheapest capacity available to us. So we always want to use the cheapest capacity. It's $10 a unit. Now, if we use regular time of 1,000 units per period, we're going to be 250 short, because this tells us we have to make 1,250 per period. So just to keep this easy, I'm going to just do the other 250 on overtime. It tells us that we can do up to 500 units on overtime. So again, that 250 is well within the 500 limit. And again, we're not going to add a second shift. Okay? So this is what each period would look like. You can see that it's very boring. I mean, each period is the same. And again, that's a main advantage of a level plan. Now, this capacity minus forecast line tells us if we're under or overproducing relative to demand. So I'm just going to put in a little formula in here. I'm going to say equal the capacity minus the forecast. All right. So in period 1, I'm making 1,250, and my demand is only 900. So I'm making 350 more than what I need. All right. In period two, in period two, you can see I'm only making 1250, but I need 1800, so I'm 550. I'm 550 below what I need to make for period two in terms of my capacity. For period three, I'm 1250, but I have 500 demand, so I'm 750 over. And then for period four, I make 1250, and you can see I have 400 demand, so I'm 850 above where I need to be there. Okay, so what we're going to do is my beginning inventory, it tells me it's 200. Now, if I start with 200 units and I overproduce by 350, that gives me an ending inventory of 550. It's just the 350 plus the 200, all right? Now my ending inventory for period one is the same as my beginning inventory two. So I now know my beginning inventory for period two is 550. That's the ending inventory for period one. And it tells me in period two I'm 550 units short. But I have 550 units in inventory, so that's going to pretty much clear out my inventory. So I'm going to end up with 0 units at the end of period two. So I can start period three with 0 units. And again, you can see I overproduced by 750, so that gives me 750 as an ending inventory for period three. So I start with 750 in period four. And again, you can see I've overproduced by 850. I have 750 in inventory, so this means I have 1,600 units. It's just the sum of 850 plus 750. Okay, this part that we've done here on our aggregate plan is units, all right? So now we're going to do this bottom part of the aggregate plan or the Excel worksheet here. This is costs, okay? So regular time, what we're going to do is, this is per unit, so it's $10 per unit, and I made 1,000 units. So my regular time cost each period is $10. Overtime was $15 per unit, and I made 250 units each period. So $37.50 is my overtime cost. There was no second shift cost, so that's 0. Now my holding costs were $1 per unit, so I assessed that on ending inventory. So it's going to be equal $1 times what I had ending inventory. So I'm going to have 550 for period one. I'm going to have 0 for period two, 750 for period three, and 1,600 for period four. Now I didn't hire or fire anybody. I just used my regular workforce, so these are all zeros. And then my total costs, what I'm going to do is add my total cost for each period. And you can see for each period, I've got those. And then my total over all periods is going to be just the sum of the 4 period total costs. So the total cost of this plan is, let me just make sure I did this correctly. Hold on here. Just want to make sure everything's right. 1,600, okay. Let me just make sure holding cost was $1 per unit. Oh, I'm sorry, it was $20 per unit. That was the problem. So this holding cost here instead of 1 should be 20. So let me just fix that. Okay, so now what I'm going to do, instead of multiplying these by $1, I'm going to multiply them by 20. Okay, and so that's going to increase my holding costs greatly. and it's going to increase my overall total cost, which is 113,000. Okay, so this plan, I'm going to call this plan my level plan with overtime. 113,000. So is this the best plan? Well, we don't know. We've got to, again, try some other plans and see if this is the best plan or not. So what I'm going to do here is let's try to do a level plan using the second shift cost. Okay. So what I'm going to do here is just copy and paste. Now my total output in units will stay the same. The only thing that I'm going to do differently here in this plan is I'm going to, instead of having overtime, I'm going to do a second shift. Okay. So what I'm going to do up here is change the overtime 250s to 0. And then I'm going to put the second shift here of 250. Okay? So that's all I'm going to do in terms of the units. I'm just serving those 250 instead of from overtime. They're coming from a second shift. Now the thing that we have to watch for here, again, my units are all the same. So again, everything's the same. To add a second shift, I have to add 2.5 people. Again, 250 units with 100 units per employee means I add 2.5 employees, which is 2 full-time, 1 part-time. So I'm going to hire 2.5 people times 1,000. So the only thing that I have to add here for second shift is I have to hire people, 2.5 people. Once I hire them, then it's a one-time cost. I just, again, I have that cost, and I just have it the first period, and then once I add them, I don't have any extra costs. The other costs I'm going to change is I'm going to add my second shift cost. So this is going to be equal $12 per unit times the 250 that I did each period. So I'm going to add 3,000 per unit. You can see again for the overtime it was $37.50. So I am saving some money in terms of variable costs just doing it on second shift, but I do have to hire people. So again, you can see I have saved some money, about $500 with this plan, 112,500 using the second shift. Okay, so as of right now, we would say that the best plan is the level plan with the second shift. Okay, so let's go back to the slides, and hopefully they're going to pop up here in a minute. Okay. Okay, so what I've shown you the pure level plan with overtime, and I've shown you the pure level plan with the shift. Now, the next one I want to show you is the chase plan. So remember, with the chase plan, our total output doesn't have to stay the same anymore. But the rule with the pure chase plan is our ending inventory should be 0. All right. So what I'm going to do is let's go back to our Excel file. I'm going to share that. And we're going to do a chase plan together. Okay. So let me just hold on. Got the wrong file here. Hold on. So I want to share. And I'm going to share. Oops. Okay. Okay, here we go. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to create a new spreadsheet, and I'm going to call it the chase plan, okay? So I'm just going to type to start brand new. So again, my forecast, we're going to use the same forecast numbers, and we'll use the same kind of template that we used before. Regular is still $10, overtime is still 15, second shift is still 12, holding is still 20, hiring is 1,000, firing is 100, and then we have our total cost. Okay. All right, so now with the chase plan, okay, let me just scroll over here so we can put it front and center. And we still have 200 in beginning inventory. Okay, so with the chase plan, again, the overall goal is that we're going to modify our capacity so that we, again, only make enough to meet demand. So you can see we have 200 in beginning inventory, so we only need to make 700 units here. Does everybody see that? We need 900. We've got 200 in inventory. Again, we want to get rid of those. And then, so that says we should just make 700. That'll drop our ending inventory to 0. Okay. Now, for period 2, we need to make 1,800 because we have no inventory. All right. And then in period 3, we need to make 500 because, again, we're just making what we need. And then period 4, we're just going to make 400. Okay, so I hope you can see the difference in a chase plan versus a level plan. So with the chase plan, we don't need to calculate a total output rate. The total output rate for pretty much all periods is going to be equal to the demand. The only time it's not is if you have inventory for the first period. Okay, so this is what we have. So now let's go back and look at our capacities for each of the regular, overtime, and second, and see if we can figure out what we're going to be doing. Okay, so we have 1,000. As you recall, we have 10 employees. Each employee can make 100 units. Okay, so that gives us 1,000 units in capacity. Well, we don't need 1,000 units in capacity. We just need 700. So that means we're going to fire 3 people. All right. So again, we adjusted our capacity from 1,000 on regular time down to 700 because 700 is all we needed. So that meant firing 3 regular time people. So 3 times 500 is the 1,500. All right. So for the first period, we're not going to use any overtime, any second shift. And you can see that the capacity, which is 700, minus the forecast of 900 gives us a minus 200. But again, we've got 200 in inventory, so we're going to be able to fulfill that underproduction by our inventory. All right, so we're going to just do units first here, and other than the hiring and firing costs, we'll do the cost second. So in period 2, we need 1,800. Well, the cheapest way to go here is regular time. Now, we can hire the 3 people that we fired. Okay, so that's going to be 3,000. And that'll make that 1,000 again. Regular time 1,000. We can only go up to 1,000. So we still need 800. So let's do, 500 on overtime. We don't have to hire anybody for that. But we still will need to hire 3 people for a second shift. So instead of hiring 3 people, we need to hire 6. We hire 3 regular people plus 3 on the second shift. So that gives us a $6,000 hiring cost. So you can see up here the 1,000 plus the 500 plus the 300 is the 1,800. So that's what our chase plan is like in period 2. Period 3, we only need 500. So what we're going to do, we're going to get rid of the overtime. We're going to fire 5 people from our regular time. Okay. And we're going to have to fire these 3 people we hired on second shift. So we're going to fire 8 people, 5 on regular time and 3 on second shift. So that gives us a layoff cost of 4,000. And then in the last period, we're going to fire 1 person. And again, another $500. Okay, so this is what the unit's like for the pure chase plan. Notice that our ending inventory for all periods is 0. And that's the hallmark of a chase plan, a pure chase plan, okay? So now that we have our units identified, we can calculate the cost. So regular time is equal to 10 times what we spent on regular. Overtime is 15 times what we needed in overtime. Second shift is 12 by what we needed. And then holding is going to be 0 because, again, we have 0 ending inventory. And again, we'll just use these hiring and firing. So for the first period, our total cost is $8,500. Okay. And then what I'm going to do here is just copy these over, and you can see, again, these are my total costs. So my total cost of the chase plan is the $49,100. Okay. So you can see that this chase based upon the costs is cheaper than all the other plans that I've done. Okay. And so, again, this is not looking at the risks, but just based on total cost alone, the chase plan looks like it's the best plan. Okay. All right, I'm gonna provide this file to you. I'm going to call this M&B Excel, and I'll put this in the course documents for you. But if we go back now to our PowerPoint slides, and we can see now that we've done the chase plan. So now what I want to show you is how would you do a mix plan? And how I do this is I go back to my Excel sheet, and hold on, let me get there. And the one thing that I notice is, okay, let's just look at the level plan, the second shift, and we'll look at the chase plan. Now, the level plan with second shift, one thing I notice is look at all these inventory holding costs. Okay, and I'll just put it right here. But it's equal sum. I can see that just all these inventory holding costs with this level plan, $58,000. Okay, this is the inventory holding cost. It's more than half of the total cost of this level plan. So one thing I get out of this to lower costs is to try to minimize inventory. Now with the chase plan, let's look at all the hire and firing costs. Okay, so equal sum of all the hire and fire costs. And I can see $12,000, and again, that's about 25% of the total cost for the chase plan. So again, to minimize total costs, I probably want to avoid any extra hiring or firing. Okay, so let's do a mix plan here. So again, there's no rules for like doing a mix plan. The whole objective here is to lower total costs. and it's kind of a trial and error basis here, okay? So I guess what I'm going to do here is I'm going to copy this chase plan over because my mixed plan is going to be kind of a chase plan, but I'm going to make some modifications to it. All right, so I'm going to come over here, I'm going to paste. Now, I'm going to make, as I said, a couple modifications to it. The first modification I'm going to make is this firing here. I spent $1,500 to fire those two people, or three people, excuse me. And if I just carried that inventory, that's going to be cheaper, I think. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to try to avoid that fire cost here. So I'm going to put a 0 here. And then to avoid that, then I've got to make that 1,000. Okay, my regular time has to be 1,000. And so now I've actually made 1,000. Okay. And this shows me that I actually made 100 more than what I needed now. So my ending inventory now is 300. Okay, so I made 100 more than I needed, plus I had 200 in inventory. So I have 300 at the end. Okay, so again, but I added regular time costs here, but I got rid of my firing costs. I also added some holding costs here. Now, what this is going to save me, though, not too much in the first period, but my beginning inventory now becomes 300, and this allows me to get rid of completely the second shift cost. And so if I avoid second shift, I also avoid hiring the three that I fired. So I get rid of completely my hiring costs in period 2. All right, but I end up making 1,500. It says I'm 300 below, but I have 300 in inventory, so again, that wipes me clean. I have 0 at the beginning, okay? Now, period 5, I have to bite the bullet, and I have to fire people. I have to, again, lower my regular from 1,000 to 500, so I'm going to have to keep this firing cost here, okay? Now, the last period, I do have a choice. Do I want to carry if I don't fire people? So if I keep this at 500, I have 100 units in inventory. Okay, is that going to be cheaper? I'm sorry, that should be 0. Okay, you can see it's going to cost me $2,000 to hold 100 units. So again, it's going to be cheaper for me just to fire that person. That's only $500. Okay, so I'm going to make this 400 and then just fire one person. Okay, but you can see what happens when changes. You see my total cost is now 47,000. So this is the point with mixed plans, is you want to try to look at the costs you're incurring with level and chase and try to minimize those. And just, the whole objective here is to lower your total costs. Okay? So if I go back to my sorry for all this back and forth stuff, but I figured, versus me writing on the slide versus using Excel, it probably makes a little bit more sense. Okay, so some of these have changed. Pure chase plan here wasn't 41,600, it was 49,100. I should have fixed this on the slide. And my mix plan instead of 37 was 47,000. Okay, so I'll make those two changes. So you can see this is the game with aggregate planning. It's trying to find the least cost and least risk way to meet demand. And we can see if we looked at just cost alone, the mixed plan would be the winner. Okay, it's the cheapest plan. Okay, so that's basically uh, looking at the process of doing aggregate planning. Now, the only other thing that I want to talk about is what happens when you allow backlogs. Okay, so I'm going to do one more plan, and it's going to be with backlogs. I'm going to do a level plan. Now, recall the the output rate was 1250. I'm sorry, was 850 for a level plan. Okay. So what I'm going to do here is let's scroll over here. We'll do one more plan here, and just to save me some time here, I'm going to just copy this first column, and I'll put my period 1, 2, 3, 4, and then I have forecasts. Those are the same. I'll use everything the same. The only thing I'm going to change here is I'm going to add 2 cells. I'm going to add a back order inventory cell, which is basically a negative ending inventory. And I'm going to add a back order cost, and let's just say that's going to be $50 per unit. I just made that up, okay? But everything else now is going to be the same, okay? So again, I added this back order row and this back order cost row. So the first back order row is to keep track of the units, and the second back order row is to keep track of the cost. Now, if you recall, my level plan if I allowed backlogs was 850. Okay, so I'm going to make 850 each period, and we calculated that. And on an earlier slide, I showed you how to do that. Okay, so every period I'm going to make 850. Well, I'm going to do it on regular because that's my cheapest. And so this tells me I'm going to have to fire 1.5 people because I lowered my regular time from 1,000 down to 850. And I don't need to use any overtime. I don't need to do any overtime or any second shift. And so that is going to be kind of boring. Again, plans are very boring on the capacity toilet, okay? Now, I still have 200 units at the beginning. So let's calculate my capacity minus my forecast. So for period 1, it shows that I've underproduced by 50. So that's going to make an ending inventory of 150. I'll use 50 from that 200 to serve the shortage there. And so I have 0 backlogs. All right, in period 2, it shows that I'm 950 short. Well, I have 150 in inventory, but that still means I'm going to be 800 short. So I'm going to can't have negative units there for ending inventory, so I'm going to put 0 and then track that extra 800 units in my back order row. All right, so then for period 3, I have 0 ending inventory. And it says that I've overproduced by 350. Instead of putting that 350 in ending inventory, the rule is to satisfy all backlogs. So I reduced my 800 backlogs down to 450. And then again, in period 4, I overproduced by 450, so I completely wipe out my backlogs. So I end up with 0 ending inventory and 0 back orders. I have fulfilled all my demand by the end of the last period there. All right, so this is how back orders work. You track them separately. They do accumulate until you overproduce to get rid of them. So let's take a look at our cost for this. Again, it's going to be the $10 times what we did on regular. We didn't have any overtime. We did have some holding costs, so $20 times what we had there. We did have some back orders, which was $50. And again, we didn't have any really hiring, just some firing costs in the first period. So the total cost for this plan is going to be, I'll just quickly do it here, is going to be $100,250. Okay, so this is I'm going to call this is a level plan with backlogs. Okay, so that was the next plan, so let me type that over there. All right, so that's how you handle backlogs, and hopefully that's helpful. And let me just go back and make sure that we've covered all the slides. And go back, share files, and yeah, okay. Okay, so again, I've covered, and again, these have changed. I've done examples for you here. So we've done a pure level plan with two different conditions. We've done the pure chase plan. We've done a mixed plan. And we've done a level plan with backlogs, okay? So when in the homework, when you see that they want you to use the transportation method, that is really a mixed plan, okay? So I didn't get a chance to eliminate that question before folks started working on the homework. So just when you see a problem using the transportation method, they want a mixed plan. Okay, well, have a good week. I hope that this eCollaborate session is helpful. I hope that the Excel files are helpful. And again, if you have any questions about the homework, just let me know, okay? So have a great week, everyone, and we'll talk to you next week.